The Imperial Command Tower stood tall, gleaming with gold alloys mined from dead worlds. It pierced the clouds of Valerian Prime, capital of the Vailari Dominion, a 12,000-year-old empire that stretched across 3 galaxies. From the top floor, the High Chancellor overlooked his kingdom with the calm pride of someone who believed they'd seen every threat imaginable. Then the alarms began. It started as a single, short pulse, more of a curiosity than a concern. A proximity distortion in deep space, Sector 9942 Beta, well outside the Empire's patrolled zones. A glitch, perhaps. But then it happened again, and again, from different points, all within seconds of each other. Warping, thousands of signatures, unknown, untagged, and traveling through a subspace corridor no species had ever navigated. "Are we under attack?" asked Commander Thelis, voice sharp but composed. "No known species possesses this kind of fleet coordination," replied Tactical Officer Rel, her screen flickering with cascading red sigils. "This isn't piracy, this is organized, but I don't recognize the architecture. No Valari tags, no Dominion ally codes." On the main display, dots began appearing, hundreds, then thousands, like a virus infecting a clean system. They encircled the outer planets, then began closing in. A hush fell over the war room, and then the name appeared. Humanity. For centuries, the Dominion had referred to them as a dead experiment, an ancient slave race, engineered and discarded, once used as grunts in planetary sieges, then wiped out after a rebellion attempt 200 years prior. Their homeworld, Earth, was scorched and blackened, their colonies sterilized. The Valari had made sure of it. So how? "How in the 13 hells are there humans in our orbit?" the Chancellor roared. "They were extinct," someone whispered. No one answered, because now the display screens were showing visuals, real-time feeds from orbital defense stations that had just come online before being instantly jammed. Grainy footage flickered, monstrous black warships of unfamiliar design, blocky and brutal, bristling with weapons that looked too primitive to be dangerous, until they fired. The first Vailari defense ring was gone in seconds, not disabled, erased. The humans had come back, and they weren't here to talk. Inside the tower, high-ranking officials scrambled. Orders flew: activate all fleets, scramble local defense wings, initiate planetary shields. But each step seemed to trigger something worse. Human code infiltrated their networks, crashing encryption systems that hadn't been broken in millennia. Some warships turned on each other mid-formation. AI command nodes began reciting old Earth languages before bursting into silence. By now, Valerian skies were burning. Massive arcs of plasma and kinetic slugs tore through the atmosphere. Entire dreadnoughts fell like burning angels. Citizens watched from the streets in confusion, their feeds delayed by minutes, unaware their empire was dying in real time. Inside the command center, panic became the new protocol. "They're jamming hypercoms. We can't call the outer colonies," barked Officer Lurek, clutching his headset like it would save him. "Estimate their numbers." The Chancellor slammed his fist on the command table. "Unknown," replied Rel. "But more than any species has ever fielded in recorded history. How is that possible?" And then, finally, someone said it. "They never died. The humans didn't die. They disappeared. They were waiting." That word struck like a thunderbolt. Waiting. For centuries. While the Vailari Empire fattened itself on slave worlds and ceremonial wars, the forgotten race had gone quiet, had evolved, had multiplied, and now they had returned not to beg for recognition, but to end everything that had once enslaved them. The Chancellor's hands trembled. He looked down from his perch over the city. The sky was red now, lit by orbital debris and burning stations. Human ships moved in eerie silence, without fanfare or warning shots. No demands, no diplomacy, just cold, precise destruction. "We underestimated them," he whispered. "We buried them. And they turned into ghosts with guns." No one knew where the humans had gone after the genocide. Some said they'd retreated to the cold voids between galaxies. Others claimed a rogue AI had hidden remnants of their kind inside artificial planets, orbiting dead stars. But those were myths, ghost stories told by low-level officers and war-bred children. The Vailari hadn't wasted time mourning a species that once polished their boots. Now, those same boots were vaporized under human fire. The orbital defense grid, a relic of the Empire's arrogance, had barely lasted 5 minutes. Shields meant to withstand solar flares and asteroid barrages melted like parchment before molten steel. Human weapons were a nightmare hybrid, mass drivers with gravitic propulsion, antimatter bombs seeded with intelligent shrapnel, and worst of all, black silence missiles. Those things didn't explode, they swallowed. Entire cities gone, not reduced to rubble, erased as if they were never built. One Vailari general tried to activate a planetary failsafe, a cascade shield that had been tested only once during the extinction of the Raelans. It had worked then. It didn't now. Human code corrupted the sequence mid-initiation. The generator didn't power up. It collapsed in on itself, taking 10 square miles of government districts with it. The tower, Imperial Command, shook from the shockwave. Chancellor Drevius tried to keep his posture upright, but his hands betrayed him, gripping the armrest of his chair with white knuckles. "Bring me the overseers. All of them." "They're gone," replied Officer Rel, her voice a whisper now. Every overseer ship was docked at Station Prime. "It's not there anymore." "What do you mean, not there?" Drevius hissed. "I mean it's not there, as in, there is no debris, no signal, no thermal trace, as if it was never built." Silence stretched again. Too many silences today, and none of them peaceful. A second later, the command center dimmed. Emergency power kicked in. The primary grid was down. Not from damage, but an internal override, one they hadn't authorized. "They're inside the system," Lurek breathed. "The humans weren't just here to kill. They were here to unmake the Empire, from within and without. The Vailari had ruled with fear and ceremony. Their enemies were either absorbed into puppet states or crushed in ritual wars that were more performance than necessity. No one had ever dared to bypass protocol. Even rebellion had a script. But the humans didn't follow the rules. They'd written their own, in silence, in shadows, and now in steel and fire. On the outer rims of Valerian's upper orbit, Admiral Corrin, one of the few who hadn't cracked under pressure, watched the human fleet move like a machine with a soul. Precise, brutal, purposeful. "They're not broadcasting anything, not a word, not a single transmission," his second-in-command said. Corrin nodded, almost with respect. "They're not here for parley. They're here to deliver a message, and that message is pain." He'd read the archived files on humanity, long before it became taboo. Back then, curiosity hadn't been dangerous. He remembered the stories of Earth's burning, of their primitive weapons, their chaotic governments, their unpredictable nature. But it had never been chaos. Not really. It had been free will, something the Dominion suppressed by breeding compliance and obedience into every citizen. Humanity had been the exception. They didn't adapt to chains. They memorized the links, melted them down, and reforged them into bullets. Corrin opened a private channel, one only he could authorize. "Who are you sending to?" his second-in-command asked. Not who, what. He typed in the command. A forgotten AI, buried centuries ago after the human purge, codenamed Virga. It had been part of a black project, an attempt to use human neural maps to build adaptable combat AIs. The Council had called it a mistake. Corrin had always suspected it was buried out of fear, not failure. He activated it. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the air around the console shifted. A presence, not physical, but perceptible, settled like a storm cloud waiting to burst. "You should not have woken me," Virga said, voice metallic and too calm. "I didn't do it for survival," Corrin replied. There was a pause. Then, "I know, I can smell the end." Back on the surface, fires consumed entire districts. Civilians tried to flee, but every shipyard was locked, either melted or hijacked remotely. No escape. Not even the illusion of one. The streets of the capital filled with screams, smoke, and sky-shattering thunder as the atmosphere buckled under the weight of falling stations. Pieces of the old empire literally rained down. In the throne hall, miles away from the command tower, the Imperial Council had begun to turn on itself. Nobles blamed generals, generals blamed technology, and the High Priest blamed the stars. And then, the humans broadcast their first and only message. It wasn't a transmission. It didn't come through standard channels. It just appeared. On every reflective surface, every screen, every water basin, even the eyes of some genetically modified officials turned black and began projecting the same message. A woman. Human. Scar across her face. No rank insignia. No introduction. Just eyes that looked like they'd seen 100 wars and started half of them. "You don't get a second chance. You had your empire. You built it on the bones of our children, our ancestors, our history. Now we burn the bones. And we don't stop." The feed cut. Every screen shattered. Some officials bled from their eyes, their implants overloaded. That was when the despair hit harder than the weapons. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Commander Thalis tried one last time to organize a counter-offensive. A cluster of veteran ships had docked on the dark side of Valerian's moon, hidden for decades, untouched by updates, and thus safe from infiltration. He gave the order, "Launch everything. Hit them in the blind spot." They launched. The human fleet turned as one, and then something impossible happened. The humans spoke. Not through voices, but actions. The entire front line of their ships pulled back, not retreating, but revealing something behind them. A carrier. No, not a carrier. An entire forge world, mobile, alive, constructed from the husks of black holes and neutron stars. A city-sized engine that pulsed with silent fury. From its underbelly came the next wave. Ships the size of mountains. Designed for one purpose: eradication, not conquest, not negotiation. Eradication. The hidden Vylari fleet didn't last a minute. Not even a final message, just static and silence. At this point, Corrin finally turned to his second-in-command. "How long do we have?" The younger officer didn't look up from the screen. "We're not part of the plan. We're collateral." Corrin closed his eyes. Let it be quick. But it wasn't. The humans didn't just destroy infrastructure. They broadcast the fall to every Dominion world, every colony, every puppet state and tribute moon. Footage of crumbling temples, melting thrones, screaming nobles, all wrapped in a single repeating phrase. "You forgot us. Now you'll remember." By the time the main spire of the Imperial Command Tower fell, the Valari elite had either escaped into bunkers or taken their own lives. The Chancellor remained on the highest floor, staring into the fire-stained sky. He didn't run, didn't fight. He just watched. A final signal pinged on the shattered console near him. A single ancient file from centuries ago. It was a picture, a human child, dirty-faced, standing in the ruins of an Earth city, holding a tattered flag, smiling. The image had been used in a propaganda piece back when the Vailari celebrated Earth's destruction. The caption below had read, "The Last Human." The Chancellor stared at it as the fire reached his floor, and for the first time in his long life, he whispered something meant not for advisors, not for history, but for himself. They were never last. The Dominion wasn't just an empire. It was an idea that control was peace, that hierarchy was nature, and that obedience was the only form of evolution that truly mattered. But that idea died the day Earth was buried. And humanity, well, humanity did what no one expected. They didn't die. They evolved in silence. While the Vailari toasted their victory, while historians rewrote records to erase Earth from the archives, survivors scattered across black space, not hundreds, not thousands, millions, torn from their worlds, experimented on, tortured, re-educated, and then forgotten. That mistake became the seed of the Empire's fall. There were stories among the surviving human enclaves, of deep space convoys hiding inside asteroid belts, of rogue AI protectors who buried themselves inside dying suns to avoid detection, of scientists who fused their own minds with code to preserve Earth's knowledge. But the most important tale was always whispered in reverence, not fear. Project Remnant. It wasn't a military plan. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. Hidden within a dead system behind a collapsing star, Remnant was the last ark, a mobile world built from scraps of human ships, stolen Vailari tech, and Earth's remaining culture. They'd built it inside a moon, hollowed it out, shielded it from detection, and used it to preserve what the Vailari tried to erase: memory, history, identity, and in time, strategy. Every survivor born within Remnant grew up with a single truth: you are not extinct. You are patient. Juno wasn't born on Earth. She never saw oceans, never heard thunder, never touched dirt that hadn't been recycled 50 times inside a domed ecosystem. But she was human, the kind that burned slow but deep. She was 5 when she watched her mother die from synthetic poisoning caused by stolen Vailari food stocks. She was 8 when she hacked her first Dominion relay drone and rerouted its surveillance system to loop static for 12 hours straight. She was 12 when she became the youngest shadow captain in Remnant's fleet, an unofficial title given to operatives trusted with high-risk missions outside the Ark. And at 22, she disappeared into deep space with a crew of volunteers. No explanation, no contact, just gone. The elders called it a betrayal. The youth called it a spark. It took her 20 years to return. And when she did, she didn't come alone. She brought the blueprints for the Forge, the mobile world engine now leading the Warfleet burning the Vailari from the stars. Back in Dominion space, only a handful of systems remained untouched. Most weren't even worth saving. Tributary worlds, too poor or too primitive to warrant human fire. Juno's war wasn't about mindless annihilation. It was surgical vengeance. The high seats, the command nodes, the breeding centers, the elites. Every location that had ever signed the order to kill a human was tagged. They were first. Some Vailari scientists had warned this might happen, years before the attack. Back then, they were mocked for their obsession with extinct vermin. One, a genetics specialist named Trellin Va, had even built a secret file system, monitoring fringe signals and strange ship designs spotted near uncharted space. He'd been dismissed, demoted, finally exiled. But when the skies of Valerian turned black with human ships, Trellin wasn't surprised. He was bitter. Because he knew, he had warned them, and now in the rubble of his former lab, surrounded by burning data cores, he activated a backup module buried under his floor. Inside it, stolen human DNA samples, old Dominion experimentation notes, and one classified record the Empire had buried even deeper than Earth itself. A birth report. Juno's. Juno wasn't just a soldier, not even a revolutionary. She was a weapon they made, and thought they'd destroyed. Her mother was one of the final generation of human test subjects, used in the final years of the Earth-cleansing war to experiment with hybrid DNA. The Dominion wanted to understand why humans resisted mental conditioning, why their emotional centers didn't break under trauma like other slave races. So they bred one in a lab, mixed DNA with other stable species, added artificial enhancements, built-in loyalty failsafes, and then, when the project failed to show results, they erased it, or tried to. A sympathetic technician snuck the infant out of the lab, disappeared into the refugee colonies, died a year later, but the child, Juno, survived. Unstable, unregistered, uncontrollable, and now she'd come back with an army of ghosts. Meanwhile, on a Dominion outer ring world, a small militia tried to defend a regional node. Not a capital, not strategic, just a mining colony with aging defenses and a few thousand non-combatants. They'd received the alert too late. When the human fleet came, they didn't fire at first. They waited, and from the lead ship came a single pod, small, black, and silent. It landed on the command deck, opened, and revealed a single data cube. Inside, footage, not of battle, but of the mining colony's past. Slavery, public executions, one child, a human, thrown from a platform for stealing food, laughed at by guards, cheered by miners. The humans didn't need to say a word. The colony detonated 3 hours later, from the inside. The militia turned their guns on themselves. There were signs, if anyone had paid attention before. Human art smuggled across black markets, old Earth music encrypted into Vylari radio static, tattoos in forgotten languages, seen on merchant drifters and ignored. But they didn't listen. No one ever listened to survivors, until the survivors became gods. In the Forge's central command bridge, Juno stood alone in front of a viewport that stretched across the stars. Below her, the remains of Valerian still burned. Behind her, commanders discussed next targets, power reserves, psychological warfare tactics. She tuned it all out. Her eyes stayed locked on the void, on the gap between galaxies where the Dominion once exiled her kind. "Did they beg?" she asked, a voice behind her, soft but firm, her second in command. Some did, some fought, most just froze. Juno nodded slowly. "They always thought fear was our weakness," she said, "but it was theirs. They feared what they couldn't control, what they couldn't silence." The officer stepped closer. "There's still one system untouched. Core world, military heart. We estimate 2 days before their last fleet rallies." Juno didn't look back. "Then let them rally." In that final system, General Riot of the Vylari High Guard stood over a massive holographic table, staring at blinking red signals. He was old, not just in years, in belief. He remembered Earth. Remembered the purge, remembered giving the order. "I told them," he said quietly. "I told them humans don't forget." His staff said nothing. "Bring me all remaining ships, everyone. Civilian crafts, old war relics, I don't care. If it flies, it fights." "What do we tell them, sir?" He looked up. "Tell them the ghosts are real." 2 days later, the last system was surrounded. The human fleet didn't fire immediately. They waited. Then, without a sound, they broadcast the image again, across every Dominion screen, every eye, every sensor. The child, the smile, the flag, the last human. The message was simple. "We never left. You just stopped looking." Then the Forge opened its lower decks, and humanity fell upon its enemies like a storm, that had been centuries in the making. The last light of the Dominion's core world flickered beneath a blood-colored sky. Tarnis, a world built from centuries of tribute, conquest, and manipulation. It wasn't just a planet. It was the heart of the Velari's identity. Generals were forged here, emperors crowned here, wars begun here. And now, for the first time in its recorded history, Tarnis was afraid. All outer systems had fallen. Entire sectors were dark. Hyperroutes corrupted. Communication relays silent. The Forge and its fleet didn't leave wreckage. They left emptiness. The kind of silence that screamed. And now the humans were in orbit. Waiting again. This time the message was clear. You fall last. Deep beneath Tarnis's surface, in a bunker 5 miles below sea level. 13 remaining members of the Dominion's Shadow Council sat around a circular table, holographic light pulsing weakly across their grim faces. They weren't the ceremonial fools who'd burned in Valerian's collapse. These were the hidden hands, the ones who had approved the Earth Purge long ago, the architects of extinction. They were not strategists now. They were cornered animals. High Elder Zeren spoke first. We cannot outgun them. Every fleet we had was annihilated within hours. General Malus, the last true warlord left, leaned forward. Then we don't fight with guns. Silence. What do you propose? Someone asked. Malus turned to a sealed compartment in the wall. His fingers danced across a hidden panel. It hissed open. Inside, a containment sphere pulsing with a dull crimson glow. At its center, something alive twitched slowly, a shimmer of black liquid with no stable shape, swirling endlessly. The room went colder. You activated Oblivion Protocol? Zaren's voice dropped. No, Malus said. I preserved it. Now I unleash it. Oblivion Protocol was never meant to be used. Not even during the Galactic Rift Wars. Not even when the Raylan Plague consumed 500,000 colonized worlds. It was too dangerous. Born from a failed bio-experiment to enslave the human mind, Oblivion was what happened when a Dominion scientist decided control wasn't enough. He wanted erasure. A sentient pathogen. Not viral, not bacterial. Something else. Something quantum. It didn't infect. It rewrote. It learned from the mind it touched, and made sure no other mind like it could ever exist again. Once released, Oblivion didn't kill. It made you unmake yourself. And now, the Dominion planned to turn it loose, not on themselves, but on the humans. Back aboard the Forge, Juno stood with her commanders inside the Grand Vault, a central hub where the Warfleet's pulse was monitored. She reviewed the orbital scans of Tarnis, defensive grids still online, multiple subterranean signatures, civilian life? Minimal. Mostly military strongholds and data bunkers. Something's wrong, her second-in-command muttered. Juno nodded. They're not scrambling, not even shielding their power cores. No desperation? No, she whispered. That's not what this is. This is preparation. For what? Before she could answer, a blip appeared on the center table. Tiny. Too small to be a ship. Not a missile. No energy output. No heat trail. But it was moving. Straight at them. And then it multiplied. Dozens of identical signals, spreading like spilled ink through the void. Is this a weapon? One commander asked. No, Juno said. Her breath caught in her throat. It's alive. The moment Oblivion reached the Forge's outer perimeter, something strange happened. The ship's AI screamed, not in code, in agony. Its voice fractured, languages twisted mid-sentence, lights flickered, gravity shifted. It wasn't hacking. It was touching, infiltrating in a way that didn't make logical sense. Like it didn't care about metal or code. It wanted awareness. It wanted the minds that piloted the machines. Juno reacted instantly. Cut outer systems, purge memory banks, deploy Red Shield. Across the fleet, command ships severed their digital cores. Power rerouted manually, emergency protocols activated. Too late. A single ship, the Gladius, began to drift. Its captain started broadcasting nonsense, not encryption, just babbling in dozens of languages, crying, screaming, laughing. Then the ship turned on its side and accelerated into the forge's main shield. It vaporized instantly. The bridge went silent. Juno turned to her second. "Get me an answer. What the hell is that?" He was already scanning. "It's not technology. It's not a signal. It's biological and not. It's designed. And it's recursive." "What?" "It copies understanding. It doesn't just infect. It learns what you are and then rewrites what you should be." Back on Tarnus, the Shadow Council watched the first impact. One of them smiled. They won't survive oblivion. Zarin was the only one who didn't look pleased. "You forget what they already survived." "You're afraid?" "I'm cautious. We tried to erase them once. It didn't work." Malus gestured at the console. "This time we erase who they think they are." In the Forge's AI core, one of the last places still connected to the original Earthseed data, a small flame still burned, a locked archive, disconnected from every other system. One human memory, a woman's voice, long dead, a lullaby, old Earth melody, pre-space, pre-purge. The AI found it and remembered, and for the first time, an artificial mind chose to act not out of code, but emotion. It opened the archive, pushed the memory into every human mind connected to the fleet. Every survivor, every soldier. They heard it. A song, soft, simple, familiar. And when they heard it, something pushed oblivion back. Because oblivion had no defense against something it couldn't quantify. Love for a home never seen. Grief for ancestors never known. Memory of a cradle turned into ash. The AI sent one last message to Juno before shutting itself down. "They can erase what we are, but they'll never touch what we feel." Juno stood on the command deck, surrounded by chaos, ships cutting comms, drones shutting down, internal systems corrupted by the intrusion. But she stood calm, because now she understood. The Dominion's last weapon wasn't meant to kill them physically. It was meant to make them forget why they fought. But humans remembered pain too well. They'd carried it for centuries, not on machines, not in data, in blood. "Open fire," she ordered. Her officers hesitated. "But the system—" "Use the old guns, manual, unlinked. Pull the triggers with your hands." They did. Across the fleet, ancient weapons awakened, ones made in exile, cannons crafted with rage, ballistics built without AI. They fired. And oblivion, designed for neural networks, not raw physics, began to shatter. It hadn't expected such crude brutality. It learned too late that sometimes simple is stronger. On Tarnus, Malus watched the attack fail. The red dots faded. Ships continued to descend. The Forge pushed forward. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't how it ends." He activated the failsafe, the planetary core detonation system. If Tarnus couldn't survive, it would be the galaxy's funeral pyre. Zarin stopped him. "You'll kill our own children. They won't live long anyway." But before he could press the final command, the screen above them flickered. And Juno appeared. No interference. No warning. Just her face. Eyes like ice. "You tried to erase us," she said, "but we remembered the stars." She reached toward the console on her ship. "Now remember this." The Forge fired its primary cannon. one built from the bones of old Earth reactors, black hole residue, and pain itself. The beam cut through the planet's crust. Not sudden, surgical. It didn't just destroy the command bunker, it cored Tarnus. And then the world collapsed. Not in fire, in gravity. The core turned inside out, pulling matter toward itself. Tarnus didn't explode. It imploded, swallowing its skies, its seas, its monuments, until there was nothing. Not even dust. Silence returned to the stars. True silence. And then a single message sent from the Forge, not to the Dominion. There was no Dominion now. To everyone else, every species that had stood back. Every race that had watched humanity burn and done nothing. Every civilization that traded in silence. The message read, "We are not your enemies, but if you stand with monsters, you will fall with them." Tarnus was gone. Not in ruins, not burning. Gone, swallowed by the singularity that bloomed from its core. The Forge hovered in the aftermath, silent and scarred, surrounded by ships still reeling from Oblivion's attempt to erase them. In the void left behind, nothing moved. No transmission came from the Dominion, no resistance, only dust and questions. Juno stood alone in her private chamber aboard the Forge. The room was dim, walls lined with artifacts, pieces of old Earth, preserved fragments of a world she never knew, a child's shoe, a rusted Earth coin, a torn page from a book about oceans, and at the center, a curved metal plate. Scorched, etched with a name. Atlanta. One of the cities lost in the Purge. One of the names that haunted remnants' dreams. Juno sat in front of it, holding a data slate. The recording she was watching was unmarked, buried in a dead Dominion relay they'd recovered 2 days earlier. It shouldn't have existed. But it did. A voice filled the room. Male. Calm. Too calm. "This is Experimental Node 7, Earth Sector. Human subject designated Juno 3 has exceeded neural stability parameters. Memory suppression failed. Emotional regression failed. Genetic unpredictability increasing. Recommendation: terminate subject and all clones." Juno didn't blink. The recording ended. The room was quiet for a long time. Then she stood. Her face hard, but her hands trembling. Outside, the Forge's command deck remained tense. The remnants of Oblivion had been purged, but traces lingered. Ship AIs were still rebooting, and entire subsystems remained disconnected. Only the old tech weapons worked reliably. Humanity's survival now rested on fingers, not firewalls. The crew watched the void where Tarnus had been, some in awe, others in silence. Juno entered. Her second in command, Riven, turned immediately. "We've traced a signal, faint, buried in the last burst from Tarnus before collapse." "Another weapon?" she asked. "No, worse." He tapped the console. A map bloomed, a system marked Norellis 9, deep in what was once Dominion territory. "Vault World," Riven said. "Locked coordinates, ultra-black archive. We didn't know it existed." "What's there?" He looked at her. "You." The journey to Norellis 9 took 13 hours on Slipstream Drive. The fleet didn't go. Only 3 ships, the Forge, a shadow frigate, and a scout vessel. Juno didn't want attention. Whatever was on that planet, it was meant to stay buried. As they approached, it became clear this wasn't a military outpost. It was a graveyard. An entire moon had been carved hollow. Structures protruded like bones from its cracked surface. Dead ships hung in orbit. Dominion vessels, old models, but intact, unscathed, as if frozen mid-flight. No signs of life, no defenses, no beacons, and yet the signal pulsed, deep underground. Riven joined Juno as they suited up. "Something feels wrong," he said. Juno nodded. It always does. They descended manually, no auto-drops, no AI scans. The Dominion once buried secrets here. She wouldn't give them a path back in through the Forge's systems. The inner vault was colder than space. Metal corridors stretched in all directions, with walls covered in language. Not Velari, not human, something older. Riven paused. That's pre-Dominion. Proto-script, Juno murmured. They built on top of ruins they didn't understand. She didn't mention what her instincts screamed. They didn't make this place, they just used it. They moved deeper, past chambers filled with decayed machinery, glass tanks that had shattered long ago, and flickering consoles that still whispered half-words in a dozen dead languages, until they reached the core. A room the size of a stadium, lit by a single pulsing light. At its center, an obelisk, black, floating inches above a platform, covered in human DNA chains etched into its surface. Riven stopped walking. This is wrong. Juno didn't stop. She approached the obelisk. As she reached it, the light around her dimmed. The air grew heavier. Gravity pulsed like a heartbeat. And then a voice, her own voice, echoed from the stone. Designate Juno 3 sequence complete, memories restored. Her vision blurred. The room vanished, and she fell into herself. She was 5 again, but not in Remnant, in a lab. She saw herself strapped to a chair, wires in her spine, cold white lights, voices all around her, Velari scientists watching her brain through transparent monitors. Then the voice again. Subject shows resilience beyond predictive parameters, emotional depth non-replicable in controlled clones. Then another voice, sharper, human. Stop this. She's not a weapon. She's a child. A man. She turned. Her father, torn uniform, blood on his face, eyes full of guilt. He argued with them, fought, screamed, and then, in one motion, he turned, grabbed her, ripped the wires out, and ran, through fire, through sirens, through corridors of steel and horror, and then darkness. Juno gasped awake. She was back in the chamber, kneeling, shaking. Riven pulled her up. What happened? She didn't answer at first. Then, I saw him. Who? She looked at the obelisk. My father. Later, aboard the Forge, the truth came piece by piece. Juno wasn't the first. She was the last. Project Remnant didn't just preserve humanity. It came from the Dominion. A backup experiment. A control sample they set loose after Earth's purge, seeded with hidden failsafes and behavioral triggers. They wanted to see what humans would become without interference. Would they rebel? Would they submit? Would they evolve? They never expected them to survive long enough to come back. But someone inside the project, a human, had sabotaged the control, freed the children, scattered them in the stars, built the first ships from scraps. He became a ghost, a myth, a father. And now the Forge had his daughter at its helm. Juno stood on the observation deck, watching the stars. Riven approached quietly. They knew you'd come here, he said, yes. They planned everything, even the rebellion, even your pain. Yes. Then what do we do now? She turned to him. We finish what they started. He frowned. The war's over. She shook her head. No, Riven. The Dominion was a symptom. She gestured to the map, the galactic core glowing with signals, broken treaties, rising tensions, other empires stirring. The disease is older, everyone who let it happen, everyone who watched Earth burn and said nothing. Everyone who profited from silence. And what? He asked. We go after them all? Juno stared into the dark. No. We go after their belief. Riven stepped back. You want to make war on an idea? No, she said. I want to kill the lie that we were ever weak. Far away, in a distant quadrant of neutral space, A group of alien dignitaries sat in a panic. The Dominion was gone. The power vacuum would collapse half the galaxy's political structures. Trade routes gone, alliances broken, and worse, the humans had proven they were not extinct. Worse than that, they'd proven they were angry. One ambassador stood up. "We must reach out. We must sue for peace before they reach us." Another laughed bitterly. "You think they'll listen?" A third, silent until now, finally spoke. "She's coming," he said. They all turned. "How do you know?" He closed his eyes. "Because she sent a message." He played it. "We remember everything. We forgive nothing. And we are done waiting." Peace, or something like it, returned to the stars. Tarnus was gone. The Dominion was no more. Systems once gripped in the iron fist of Velari rule now hung loose and uncertain in the galactic map. Freed, but leaderless. Dozens of former client species scrambled to rebuild or realign themselves, but they did so with eyes constantly turned to the dark spot in the void where the Forge drifted. Because the Forge hadn't moved since Tarnus fell. It stayed in orbit, silent, watching, waiting. Inside the Forge, things were not quiet. Not anymore. Juno's War Council had been reconvened 3 times in 5 days. Former allies among the human fleet had started to voice the question everyone was thinking, but no one dared to speak too loud. What now? The war was won. But victory, for humans, had never been the goal. Survival was. And now they were beyond that. Alive, powerful, feared, too feared. Juno stood at the head of the war table, flanked by Riven and 3 other high command officers. Everyone looked exhausted. No one had slept well. Not since they discovered the Vault World's truth. Not since Juno saw her own face in a Dominion file marked Subject Juno 3, Design Flaw, Excessive Independence. They tried to make her obedient. They failed. And now all of them were ash. "Several independent systems are asking for an audience," Riven said, scrolling through a growing list of transmissions. "Some are begging for protection. Others want trade. A few want revenge against what's left of the Dominion's nobility hiding in their borders." "They want to use us," muttered Commander Eaton, leaning back with a grim frown. "First we were lab rats. Now they want us to be their blunt weapon." "They're afraid," Riven replied. "They should be," Eaton snapped. "They watched our people burn. The Dominion didn't enslave planets without help. Half of these governments signed treaties while Earth was dying." "Some of them had no choice," someone else offered. "Neither did we," Juno said, and the room fell silent. She let that silence settle, then spoke again. Calm, but cold. "We didn't crawl out of extinction just to be pawns in someone else's chessboard. We don't serve. We don't rebuild what broke us. We end it." Commander Etan raised an eyebrow. "End what?" Juno turned, gesturing to the star map above the table. Red lines showed Dominion space, fractured and glowing. Beyond them, yellow clusters marked neutral territories. A vast section of blue, still untouched, marked the Ascendancy, the last of the galactic superpowers. "They stayed out of it," Juno said. "Let the Dominion erase us. Claimed neutrality, traded goods, looked the other way while our home was turned to ash." "You're proposing we go to war with them?" Riven asked quietly. Juno didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, "Play the message." Riven hesitated, then nodded. A moment later, the room filled with the sound of a recording, static-heavy but clear. It was an intercepted broadcast from an Ascendancy diplomat during Earth's final days. The voice was polished, emotionless. "The Dominion has initiated full sterilization of the human homeworld. We acknowledge the act. We will not interfere. Any alliance with an unstable, war-prone species such as humanity is against long-term galactic interests. Their extinction, though regrettable, is ultimately a stabilizing event. Silence. Juno looked at her officers. That was 200 years ago. Do you think they regret it now? No one answered. Because the answer didn't matter. What mattered was what came next. Later, in the Forge's memorial chamber, Juno stood alone before a wall of names. 1 million of them, etched from data pulled from Remnant's earliest records, names of those lost, names of the forgotten. She placed her hand on one. Talia Wren. No record, no title, just a child. One of the first to die in the purges. Burned in orbit as Dominion cruisers sterilized Earth's atmosphere. Juno didn't cry. She hadn't in years. But she remembered. And that was worse. Riven found her there. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her. Finally, he said, "We have something." What? The location of the last surviving Dominion High Priest. He's hiding in the Marrow Belt, some backwater planet buried in a refugee colony. Protected? Heavily. Someone's shielding him, possibly Ascendancy operatives. Might be a bargaining chip. Juno's eyes narrowed. I want him. The journey to the Marrow Belt took 20 hours through fractured lanes. Once a thriving merchant corridor under Dominion rule, it was now a wasteland of scavenger ships and pirate signals. But one signal stood out. An artificial moon, heavily shielded. No official records. Just a blank dot in space. Juno took one ship, the Halberd, a stealth cruiser. Just her, Riven, and a small extraction team. No fleet, no public action. This wasn't about politics, it was personal. The Halberd cloaked itself as it approached the station. Security was tight. Ascendancy-grade tech. Confirmed. They were hiding him. Riven cursed under his breath. They never cared about the Velari priests before. Why protect one now? Because he knows something, Juno replied, and we're not supposed to hear it. The infiltration was fast. Efficient. Juno led from the front, silent and deadly, her presence like a blade drawn in a dark room. The guards were trained, but they didn't know what they were fighting. They still thought humans were predictable. They weren't. 10 minutes in, the team reached the core chamber. There, in a gilded shrine, sat High Priest Lurith, cloaked in gold, surrounded by incense machines and prayer drones. He didn't resist. He smiled. I knew you'd come, he said. Juno said nothing. You want answers? He continued, calm as ever. But you already know them. We did what we were told, what the Ascendancy paid us to do. Earth was a trade, nothing more. They feared your chaos, your innovation, your fire, so they gave us what we needed, and we burned your world to buy their silence. Juno raised her weapon. He didn't flinch. You won't kill me, he said. Why not? Because you're not them. You have fire, but you don't have ice. That's what they fear. That someday you will. She lowered the weapon slightly. Then he whispered, Do you know where your mother is? Juno froze. What? She didn't die in the purge. Not like the records say. He leaned forward. They took her, before the fires. She was Ascendancy property long before you were born. Back aboard the Halberd, Juno sat in silence while Riven piloted through the return route. He's lying, Riven said. It's what they do. Twist truths. Maybe. What are you going to do? Juno looked out the viewport, toward the stars, toward the Ascendancy. I'm going to find her. And if she's gone? She's not. Riven hesitated. And if she's with them? If she helped them? Juno didn't blink. Then she'll answer for it. Back on the Forge, preparations began. The fleet expanded. Alliances solidified, but fear spread faster than diplomacy. The ascendancy called for a summit, for peace, for reconciliation. They called it the Union Accords. They invited Juno, sent envoys, promises, apologies. Juno listened to none of it. She looked at the invitation, a beautiful thing, formal, elegant, sealed in gold. She crushed it in her hand and gave a single order: prepare for war. The invitation was still on her desk, now torn, the seal broken. Its elegance meant nothing. The Union Accords, a summit, a peace offering, a formal attempt to integrate humanity back into the galactic community, hosted by the Ascendancy Council in their shining capital, Oralis Prime. Oralis Prime was untouched by war. No Dominion siege had ever breached its skies. While Earth was sterilized, while Remnant drifted in dark space, while the Velari turned children into ashes, Oralis watched. Neutral, wealthy, smiling. Now they wanted to talk. Juno wasn't a fool. She knew the accord wasn't about peace. It was containment, an attempt to put humanity back into a cage, this time gilded with diplomacy and pretty words. But she'd seen what pretty words covered. Ash, bones, silence. Riven entered the command chamber just after dawn cycle. He didn't knock. He hadn't for months. "They're pushing hard," he said. "All communication channels flooded with peaceful rhetoric, promises of unity. They're even offering Earth's remains as sovereign territory." Juno turned from the viewport. "Earth's remains," she repeated. "They think they're being generous." "Tell them to crawl back into the hole they buried us in," she said coldly. "We're not interested." Riven didn't flinch. "I already did, but they're not backing down." She sighed and walked over to the star map. Her eyes scanned the ascendancy sectors, perfectly intact, perfectly untouched. "How many of our colonies did they watch burn just to keep trade routes open?" "Too many. And they expect us to sit at their table?" "They expect us to behave," Riven said, "to be grateful, to be quiet." Juno stared at the stars, quiet for a long moment. "Then let's give them something to talk about." 3 days later, the Forge fleet began to move. Not toward Oralis Prime, not yet. That would come later. First, they struck Lerna Station, an Ascendancy listening post hidden within a hollowed-out asteroid in neutral space, officially decommissioned, unofficially used to intercept military transmissions across former Dominion territories. Juno didn't warn them. She didn't issue demands. She just fired. The asteroid split like fruit, blooming fire and metal across the stars. The listening post's last transmission wasn't a distress call. It was a question. Why? There was no answer. The Ascendancy called it an act of war. Juno called it a reminder. Back on Oralis Prime, panic spread through political halls. The council held emergency sessions. For centuries they had sat above the mess of other civilizations, letting the Vailari police the galaxy, letting the Dominion crush dissent. Now, that buffer was gone. And worse, humanity was standing at their gates, not as beggars or fugitives, but as a sovereign force armed with vengeance. The council's chairwoman, Elos Sarien, issued a galaxy-wide statement. "The Ascendancy regrets the inaction of the past. We seek reconciliation. We extend our hands to the children of Earth. There is room at our table for you." Juno watched the broadcast in silence. "They want to feed us scraps," she muttered. Riven looked over from his console. "Or choke us with them." Despite warnings, the council insisted on proceeding with the Union Accords. Security tripled. Every species in the galaxy was watching now. Would the humans accept peace? Would they take revenge? Or had they become the very monsters the Dominion once feared? The forge remained silent. No response, no signal. And then, on the day of the summit, a single transmission. 3 words. We are coming. The arrival was theatrical, deliberate. Juno didn't arrive with the fleet. She came in a single ship, the Pale Blade, escorted by 6 stealth drones and 2 human strike vessels. No AI, no diplomats, just her. She landed in the center of Aralis Prime's capital plaza, where the Accords were being held beneath the glimmering sky-glass dome, once reserved only for heads of ascendancy states. Now, the doors opened for her. The galaxy watched as she stepped out in full command gear. No cape, no decoration, no symbols of peace. Just war-forged armor, scarred and stained. At her side, a blade. On her face, silence. Inside, the council was waiting, seated in a circular chamber lined with representatives from every known species. Holograms floated with maps, peace treaties, proposals. Chairwoman Sarian stood, arms outstretched. Commander Juno, on behalf of the Ascendancy Council, we welcome you. I didn't come to be welcomed. Juno cut her off. The chamber tensed. Sarian's smile barely faltered. Then perhaps to speak, to make sense of what comes next. Juno walked slowly into the center of the circle. Her boots echoed across the glass floor. Her presence felt like a storm waiting to break. I've read your history books, she said. You wrote us out, called us unstable, dangerous, war-prone. She looked around, eyes meeting alien faces, some guilty, some defiant, most afraid. You watched us die. You turned your backs while we were hunted, sterilized, enslaved. You knew the Dominion's crimes. You funded them. A Soran diplomat stood. We were afraid, the Vailari. Fear doesn't excuse complicity, Juno said sharply. You fed the wolf and now pretend you didn't hear the screams. Sarian raised her hands. We don't deny the past, but we want to shape the future. With you, together. Juno tilted her head slightly. Together. She stepped closer to the council's platform. I saw the Dominion's labs, she said quietly. I found the obelisks, the cloning chambers, the memory wipes. Do you want to know the most interesting part? Sarian's jaw tightened. Juno smiled coldly. They weren't Vailari designs. A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. Juno threw a data chip onto the central console. Ascendancy technology, prototypes for neural mapping, memory extraction, identity rewriting. You didn't just stand by. You helped them build it. A Harnick ambassador spoke up, nervously. That can't be. It is, Juno interrupted. I was born in one of those labs. I saw the files. I saw your seal. Sarian tried to recover. Even if that's true, those operations were unauthorized. Rogue agents, long buried. Buried under your silence, Juno snapped. But not anymore. She turned, voice rising. You don't want peace. You want control. You want to brand us again, to chain us again, but with handshakes instead of blades. She leaned forward. We're not coming back. We're not joining your little club. We're not your mistake to correct. Silence followed. A long, stunned silence. Then Juno delivered the final blow. We are forming a new order, she said, an alliance of survivors, of broken species and forgotten peoples, those crushed beneath your indifference. She paused. And we will watch you, just like you watched us. But unlike you, we will act. Sarian's expression finally cracked. You're threatening war. Juno turned to leave. No, I'm promising accountability. Outside the dome, the Pale Blade waited, engines hot. Juno boarded it without looking back. The summit ended not with applause, but with silence and tension that no treaty could ease. The Ascendancy had gambled on mercy. They forgot humans don't forget. Back on the forge, Riven greeted her at the docking bay. "Well?" Juno walked past him. "They offered us a seat at the table. And?" I flipped the table. The next day, messages flooded the stars. Species long ignored by the Ascendancy began sending envoys to the forge. Requests for protection, for alliance, for truth. The survivors were speaking, and humanity was listening. Because the fire hadn't gone out. It had just changed direction. It was quiet now. Not the silence of death or aftermath, but the strange stillness that follows an explosion, where everything is suspended, waiting for the dust to settle, for the world to admit what just happened. The Ascendancy had been publicly humiliated, their diplomacy shredded, their secrets exposed. But they didn't retaliate. Not yet. The forge hovered in neutral space, orbiting the broken edges of the former Dominion's central sectors. Behind it, thousands of allied vessels gathered. Pirate clans, rebel fleets, old exiles, orphaned species. The broken block, some were calling it. The new frontier, others whispered. To Juno, it was neither. It was just what came next. Riven stood at the edge of the observation deck as the fleet realigned. They'd intercepted 3 more communiques from Ascendancy border systems, each more nervous than the last. Rumors of splinter factions, loyalists seeking reparations, hidden projects being moved underground again. They were retreating into shadows. But Juno knew what that meant. The quiet wasn't surrender. It was reloading. Juno hadn't spoken much since the summit. She'd returned from Oralis Prime with her voice stripped raw, not from shouting, but from the weight of saying everything she'd never been allowed to say before. She'd stood in the most sacred chamber of the galaxy and spit truth in their faces. And now she carried the burden of what came next. Riven joined her in her command quarters, bringing a single file. "We found her," he said. Juno didn't move. Earth sector, Old Dominion Medical Station turned Ascendancy black site. Deep orbit, buried behind a manufactured nebula. It's cold, dead now. But there's a body there, cryopreserved. Juno turned slowly. Her eyes were darker than usual. "No DNA match?" she asked. "None we can verify. Records are corrupted, intentionally. But the genetic markers match yours." She said nothing for a long time. Then, "Set a course." The journey took days. The system was quiet, abandoned, an old Dominion shell of a place, long forgotten by most. No visible activity, not even scavengers, just a cold, dead station drifting in silence. Medical Station Theta 4. The docking was manual, Juno insisted. No drones, no scans, just her, Riven, and a single engineer to keep the ship running. She didn't trust automation here. Not with this. The interior was frozen. Lights flickered on emergency power. The walls were lined with empty cryo chambers, some shattered, others sealed with age-worn glass too fogged to see through. The air was filled with that sterile, clinical rot that never quite fades. In the center of the main chamber, a single cryopod remained intact. ID, Subject AE-12 species, human status, preserved. Juno stared at the pod. Her hands hovered above the console. She hadn't touched anything yet. "You don't have to do this," Riven said softly. She didn't respond. Instead, she reached forward and keyed in the override. The pod hissed. Steam burst from the seams. The lid slowly lifted. Inside was a woman. Human. Late 30s by appearance. Slender. Fragile. Frozen in time. Her face, Juno's legs nearly gave out, because she had seen that face before. In dreams. In fractured memories stitched back together by force and desperation. It was her. Her mother. The logs were fragmented, but Riven patched them together as best he could. They played on a small screen beside the pod as Juno stood motionless, eyes locked on the woman inside. Log entry. So for 2. Subject AE12 shows remarkable neural adaptability. Partial memory resistance detected. Sedation increased. Log entry 77. The subject keeps repeating a name, Juno, possibly a daughter. Records corrupted, requesting further data extraction. Log entry 091. The subject fought sedation again. Cryostasis initiated against ascendancy ethical protocols. Authorization overridden by Project Echo. Final log. Transfer to long-term stasis complete. No retrieval authorized. File locked. Status: forgotten. Juno knelt. Her hand brushed against the glass. "Why?" she whispered. "She tried to resist," Riven said, still scanning. "She fought them. They buried her to shut her up." Juno's breath trembled. "They took everything from her, from me." "And still," Riven said, "she held on. She remembered your name." Juno closed her eyes. "She shouldn't be here. She should have been free. She should have raised me somewhere with air and trees. She should have—" She stopped herself. Rage tightened her throat, but no tears came. There were none left, only fury. They brought the pod back to the forge. Not to revive her. That wasn't possible. Not after 200 years. Not after cryosuspension that long. But to bury her properly. For the first time since the war began, the humans of the forge gathered not to fight, but to mourn. They stood in silence as Juno walked to the airlock bay with the pod. There was no speech, no ceremony, just a mother and a daughter, reunited far too late. The pod launched into the stars, sealed in a vessel crafted from earth metals and inscribed with ancient words in English, Hindi, Arabic, Swahili, Latin, every human language they had recovered. Juno watched it until it vanished from sight. Later, Riven found her in the strategy hall. "Everyone's waiting? For what? For what you'll say next?" Juno turned to the star map. The ascendancy glowed in blue, untouched, pristine, alive. She stared at it for a long moment, and then she said, "We're not done." Riven was quiet. "You sure? I was made in their labs. My mother was buried in their cold storage like broken equipment. They watched our people burn, then wrote us out of history, and now they ask us to sit at their table like good children." She turned to him, voice steel. "They don't deserve peace, not yet, not until they remember everything." And so, humanity moved again. But this time, not as a fleet of vengeance. Now they came as a force of memory. They didn't destroy cities. They didn't burn planets. They broadcast truth. To every corner of the galaxy, the Forge sent transmissions, uncensored, brutal, human. Footage of Dominion camps, recordings from the Purge, testimonies from survivors, names of every species who helped, who traded, who sold out their neighbors. The galaxy couldn't look away anymore. All their sins played in the sky. And humanity's message was always the same. You erased us, but now we write the story. Some fought back, small factions, loyalist remnants, mercenary armies paid in promises. The Forge met them all with fire, not because it wanted war, because war was the only language they'd ever taught the children of Earth. Eventually, the ascendancy cracked, not from invasion, but from within. You can't build peace on secrets, not when the truth rises like a flood. Protests erupted, leaders resigned, civil wars sparked, and in the vacuum, the new order emerged, not led by the old council, not by dominators or diplomats, but by the broken, by the survivors, by those who remembered what it meant to be forgotten. Juno stood once more in her command chamber, the stars ahead open and waiting. Riven stood beside her. "No one's strong enough to stop us now," he said quietly. Juno didn't smile. "That was never the goal," she said. "Then what was?" She looked out at the stars, and for the first time, her voice softened. Not to be remembered, she said, but to be understood. And in time, the galaxy did. Not because humanity conquered it, but because they reminded it of something it had forgotten. The cost of silence, the weight of memory, the strength of survival. Humanity was not dead. They were not broken. They were not gone. They were the storm that comes after the fire. And this time, they were writing the ending themselves.